The cold wind howled through the narrow alleyways of the city, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and distant fires. Elias pulled his coat tighter around his frame, his breath forming fragile clouds in the dim glow of flickering streetlights. He was a man hunted by his past, a past that seemed to breathe down his neck at every corner, whispering his sins back into his ears. He hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Elias had faith, when he stood in the warmth of a church and believed in redemption. But that was before. Before the night, everything changed. Before the mistake he could never take back. The crime that made his hands forever unclean. Elias had once been a devoted son, a man who prayed with conviction and lived with integrity. But in a moment of anger, in a night clouded by fury and pain, he had crossed a line he never imagined he would. The memory of that night clung to him like a shadow, whispering that he was beyond redemption. He had spent years running, from the law, from himself, from God. The city had become both his refuge and his prison. Every alleyway, every shadow felt like a ghostly reminder of what he had done. Yet, despite everything, a part of him refused to fully succumb to the darkness. He had heard of men who found peace even after walking through fire. He just couldn't believe it was possible for him. The streets stretched endlessly before him, each turn bringing a fresh wave of memories. He had once walked these roads with purpose, dreams filling his heart. Now, his only companion was regret. His hands trembled as he passed a familiar bakery, its scent stirring a long-buried moment. His mother, laughing as she bought him a warm loaf on a cold evening. He clenched his fists. That life was gone. He had destroyed it. His feet carried him forward, past neon signs and darkened shop windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled. It was a sound he hadn't heard in years, yet it struck something deep inside him. An old instinct buried beneath layers of guilt and anger. He found himself drawn to the sound, his pulse quickening as he turned the corner. There was the cathedral. It stood defiant against time, its stained glass windows casting broken reflections of saints onto the wet pavement. A shiver ran down his spine. He had no right to be here, yet his feet refused to move away. The city was silent, save for the occasional rustle of the wind against the trees. The weight of his sins pressed upon him like an iron chain, each link forged from a choice he wished he had never made. He took a shaky breath and placed a hesitant foot onto the cathedral's worn stone steps. His pulse pounded in his ears. It was strange, standing before a place of worship after all these years. Would it reject him the way he feared God had? With a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The scent of wax and aged wood embraced him instantly, mingling with a faint aroma of incense. The cathedral stretched before him, vast and quiet, its pews lined with the ghosts of devotion. The air was thick with reverence, as if time itself had slowed within these walls. The glow of countless candles flickered along the altar, their golden light casting long, uncertain shadows. Elias hesitated at the entrance, an intruder in a sacred space. Could he truly step inside? Would the walls themselves crumble at the weight of his presence? Or worse, would nothing happen at all? He half expected judgment to strike him down the moment he crossed the threshold, but the silence remained, patient and unyielding, waiting for him to decide. His footsteps echoed against the hollow streets, leading him toward the old, crumbling cathedral. The air smelled of old parchment and melted wax, pulling him into memories he had buried deep. Rows of empty pews stretched before him, and at the far end of the hall, beneath the towering crucifix, an old priest knelt in silent prayer. Elias stood at the edge of something he couldn't name. His heart pounded as he looked up at the altar, the weight of his past pressing down on him. The priest's words still lingered in his mind. Could he truly let go? Could he finally accept the forgiveness that had always been there, waiting for him to reach out? The silence in the cathedral stretched, thick and heavy, yet comforting. Elias dropped to his knees, the cold stone pressing against him. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he prayed. Not with the scripted words of his youth, but with raw, desperate honesty. God, if you're there, if you can still hear me, I'm tired of running. I can't carry this alone anymore." Tears burned in his eyes as memories of his sins washed over him. He had believed for so long that he was beyond redemption, that the weight of what he had done was too great. But in that moment, something shifted. The crushing burden on his soul began to lift piece by piece. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. He felt a presence, not of condemnation, but of grace, the kind he had never thought he deserved. And as he knelt there, whispering his broken prayer, Elias finally understood. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to walk forward despite it. Forgiveness is not always an easy road. It does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean that the consequences of our actions vanish. But it does mean that we are not defined by our worst mistakes. Elias's journey mirrors that of many who have stood at the crossroads of guilt and grace, unsure if they are worthy of redemption. What Elias learned in that cathedral is a truth that resonates beyond his own story. No sin is greater than God's mercy. Too often, people trap themselves in a cycle of self-condemnation, believing they must bear their burdens alone. But the message of faith is not about carrying the impossible weight. It's about laying it down at the feet of the one who is strong enough to carry it. Elias's transformation was not instantaneous. It was a process, one that required him to face his past, seek reconciliation where possible, and learn to forgive himself. True redemption does not come from denial, but from confronting one's actions and making the choice, day by day, to be better. For those who feel lost, for those who believe they have wandered too far, Elias's story serves as a beacon of hope. No one is beyond grace. No matter how dark the past, there's always a path forward, a path paved by humility, by seeking forgiveness, and by accepting the love that has been there all along. The journey is not easy, but it is worth taking. As Elias stepped out of the cathedral that night, the city seemed a little less cold, the weight on his shoulders a little lighter. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he was willing to walk it. And that was enough. Psalm 103 verses 10 to 12. He does not treat us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his mercy toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Psalm 51 verses 1 to 2. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. Psalm 32, verses 1 to 2. Blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. Psalm 130, verses 3 to 4. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. Psalm 86 verse 5. For you, Lord, are good and ready to forgive, and abundant in mercy to all who call upon you. Psalm 103 verse 3. Who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases. Psalm 130 verses 7 to 8. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord there is mercy, and with him is abundant redemption. And he shall redeem Israel from all his iniquities. Psalm 25, verse 11. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my iniquity, for it is great.